If you think God is silent, maybe it's not God. Maybe it's your emotions. When your emotions are at the surface, God's guidance doesn't stand out amid the noise. Many people confuse deep sadness with God's silence, and this confusion keeps them lost. Jesus revealed a different way to recognize God's voice, even in your most vulnerable moments. You wake up and the weight is already there. Sadness found you before you even opened your eyes. You try to be strong, but inside, you're shattered. People say, have faith, pray more, but you can barely whisper Jesus' name. Tears come easy, words don't. And then comes that terrible thought. Did God forget me? Is he too busy with everyone else? Did I do something so wrong that he walked away? You feel lost, alone, invisible, like you're screaming in an empty room and nobody can hear you, not even God. But here's the truth that changes everything. You're confusing your emotions with God's voice, and this confusion keeps you trapped. Jesus said in John 10:27, "My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me." Pay attention. He didn't say, "My sheep who feel my presence." He said, "My sheep who hear my voice." Feeling and hearing are different things. Jesus doesn't guide you through your emotions. He guides you through his voice, which remains constant even when your emotions are in chaos. This is the anchor phrase you need to remember. Your emotions at the surface aren't God's absence. They're just emotional noise drowning out the voice that was always there. Think about sheep. They're fragile animals, get lost easily, get hurt, cry when scared. And you know what happens when a sheep panics? It stops hearing the shepherd. The fear is so loud it can't distinguish his voice anymore. But the shepherd doesn't stop speaking. He keeps calling. His voice hasn't changed. What changed was the sheep's ability to hear amid the panic. That's exactly what happens to you in deep sadness. God's voice didn't disappear. Your emotions just created so much internal noise you can't distinguish his voice from emotional chaos anymore. And then comes the crucial second part. I know them. He knows you by name, knows every tear, every sleepless night, every silent despair. Psalm 34:18 confirms, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." Close, not far. The more broken you are, the closer he is. But proximity isn't the same as you feeling that proximity. Here's the confusion that keeps millions trapped. They think God's voice is a feeling, a chill, an inexplicable peace, an overwhelming emotion. And when they're in deep sadness and don't feel anything, they conclude, God isn't speaking to me. He abandoned me. But that's a devastating lie. God's voice was never based on feeling. It was based on truth, on his word, on who he is, not on how you feel about who he is. Think about John 10:27 again. Jesus didn't say, "My sheep feel my presence." He said, "My sheep hear my voice." Hearing is different from feeling. Hearing requires attention, not emotion. Hearing requires you to stop the internal noise and focus on what's being said, even when you feel nothing. Your deep sadness isn't a sign that God stopped speaking. It's a sign you need to learn a different way of hearing, a way that doesn't depend on being emotionally stable first. Because if you wait to feel peace before hearing God, you could wait forever. But if you learn to hear his truth, even amid emotional chaos, then you discover a faith that can't be shaken by circumstances. If this is speaking to you, stay until the end. So how do you do this practically? How do you hear God's voice when your emotions are screaming louder? Spiritual reprogramming. You need to train your mind to distinguish between what you feel and what is truth.
When your brain whispers you're alone, you stop and you declare the truth, not the feeling. Jesus said he knows me. This is true regardless of what I feel. When comes nobody cares, you interrupt. The shepherd counts every tear of mine. That's reality, not my emotion. When comes God is far, you break it. Psalm 38:18 says he's close to the brokenhearted. My feeling lies, the word doesn't. This isn't denying your emotions. This is refusing to let your emotions be the final authority on what's real. Your emotions are valid. Your sadness is real. But your emotions aren't God. And when you treat them as if they were, when you use how you feel as the thermometer of God's presence, you get lost. God's voice is his word. My sheep hear my voice. This phrase doesn't change when you're sad, doesn't become less true when you're broken, remains solid as a rock while your emotions are like waves. So you anchor your mind not in what you feel, but in what he said.
Here's what you do daily. In the morning, before the day starts, you declare, Jesus, I am your sheep. You know me. Today I choose to hear your voice, not my emotions. 3 times, slowly, let each word settle. During the day, when sadness presses, and it will press, you don't fight the feeling. You simply acknowledge it. I'm sad, but sadness isn't God's voice. Then you ask, what does the word say? And you declare the truth. He is close. He knows me. He hasn't abandoned me. At night, before sleeping, thank you because your voice doesn't depend on my emotional state. You spoke. I choose to believe. It's not ritual. It's training. You're training your mind to distinguish between emotional noise and divine truth. And gradually, not instantly, but consistently, you'll notice sadness still comes, but you don't get lost in it anymore, because you know the difference between what you feel and who God is. This changes everything, because now you're no longer hostage to your emotions. You don't wake up in panic thinking, I don't feel God today, so he's not here. You wake up knowing my feelings will fluctuate, but his voice is constant, and I choose to hear the constant, not the fluctuation. It's not about denying pain. It's about not letting pain define reality. The shepherd's voice keeps saying, I know you, you're mine, I'm here. Even when you feel nothing, even when you're broken, even when you're lost. And when you learn to hear that voice above the noise, your faith becomes unshakable, because it's no longer based on how you feel, it's based on who God is. If you're in deep sadness now, if you confused your emotions with God's voice, if you thought he left just because you don't feel him, I want you to do something. Write in the comments, he knows me. This is how you choose his voice instead of yours. This is how you anchor your mind in truth, not feeling. This is how you exit confusion and enter clarity. When you write it, something will shift. You will be declaring, I won't use my emotions as a thermometer of God's presence anymore. I will hear his voice, and his voice says, he knows me. Right now, he knows me. And let this truth begin to reprogram how you hear God in your most vulnerable moments.